let's start with Calvin. Calvin, what did you bring?
I brought a picture of Atlas.
Ooh, strongman Atlas. Okay, cool. We'll hear more about that in a moment.
Mhm.
And Skip, what about you? What did you bring?
I brought a picture of my daughter.
Oh, I don't think I've ever seen your daughter, Skip. Okay. Ooh,
She's in
excited.
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay, I'm excited to hear more about her. So first of all, I want to say to Calvin and Skip, welcome. And to anybody who might be tuning in, welcome once again to another episode of Not Quite Strangers. This podcast is designed to inspire curiosity because I got two people here who've never met each other. Well, we met like 15 minutes ago. They met 50 minutes ago. But also not only inspire curiosity, but build connection in any way we can through this conversation. And who knows, we might just disrupt and challenge the status quo with what we talk about. That's the most exciting part. My name is Valerie Hope. I am your host. And one of the reasons that I brought these two gentlemen together is because I know both of them personally and how committed and how positive, motivational, and inspirational they are when it comes to relationships. I know Calvin, gosh, maybe 3-4 years ago, Calvin, we met because I started attending some of the workshops that you and your wife facilitated around understanding men and understanding women. And it was fascinating information. And most recently, I saw you on a panel of men talking about your experiences with women. And I was like, Calvin's got to be on the podcast. I think it'll be a great experience. And the kind of things that I would like my friends to hear about, both men and women, I think could appreciate some of the things that I remember the people in the men panel sharing. And then I thought, who could I pair you up with? And then I thought, my friend Skip. Oh my goodness. Skip, you and I, we go back 10 plus years, probably. You started off, I think, as a friend of my brother.
He was my Spanish teacher.
Really?
Yep.
I don't remember this. Oh my gosh, that's why. And then somehow you were adopted into the Hope family.
We adopted each other. Eduardo and I, we just hit it off, and we became friends. He's an easy guy, to hang with.
He really is. I trained him. No. I did not. Take it back, delete. Oh, no, but so grateful because Skip, one of the things that I most admire about you, first of all, is your positivity. Always constantly positive. And anytime I've posted anything on Facebook about relationships or about men understanding women or women understanding men, you've made some nice and, really encouraging or insightful comment. And so I thought, oh, here's another man who'd be awesome to pair with Calvin to have this conversation about relationships or manhood or, interesting things. But I'm now curious, the two of you, why did you say yes to my invitation? Calvin, we'll start with you. Why did you say yes?
Well, first off, I like the idea that you're bringing and the concept. So I think it's really great. And, I just wanted to be able to contribute in some little way. And yeah, so that's it.
Cool. And you were a little doubtful though, because you're
yeah, it was.
I need 2 proofs of ID. I need
Exactly.
a DNA test.
No, yeah. So yeah, because I said, well, do you have anything to show me kind of how it goes? And so you sent me some awesome podcasts, and I was like, okay, I can do that. So yeah.
I knew you can. You sure could. Thank you so much, Calvin.
Yeah.
Skip, what about you? Why did you say yes?
Well, I thought the topic was fascinating. And of course, I was flattered that you invited me. But the topic is something that I write about on this website called medium.com. And I'm not giving them a plug, they're a nonprofit, but it's just a subject that's, it really fascinates me. And my background is in communication, electronic media. And it just seemed like a cool thing to do. And the idea is great.
Cool.
I love it.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you both saying yes and taking a risk in meeting a complete stranger online, live, and talking about something so personal. So I asked the two of you to bring the object that best represents what you enjoy, what you are most proud of being a man. And Calvin, you showed a photo of Atlas. So tell us, why did you choose that particular object to represent?
Yeah, it took me, I was thinking about this, and I thought recently what impacted me the most was that image when I saw it. So it's Atlas. He's basically in Greek mythology holding up the heavens, if you will, and on his shoulders. And the image is powerful where first off, it's a statue in Rockefeller Center in New York. So everybody can go there and see it or pull it up online. And to me, it's a powerful statue. It has strength in it. It has, to me, I see overcoming. I see stepping up into greatness. I see sometimes the burden that men carry on their shoulders through life. It's the world that they have, or the things that they feel they're responsible for. All these things that they're carrying. I see that in an image, and I see in that image or that statue, a man overcoming and bearing that burden through life. So it just speaks to me in that way. So yeah.
Men carrying the world on their shoulders. I didn't realize how much of that was true until I learned some of the things I learned from you and your wife and the other facilitators from the courses.
Yeah.
And I have 3 brothers. So that's the funny part. I was like, wow, really? You guys think this much?
Right.
So I want to hear more about that. And Skip, what is it about the image of your daughter?
Well, it's difficult to articulate, but it indicates to me that I did a good job as a man, as a father, because, well, she has a doctorate. She has an incredibly good job. She's a great woman. And of course, I'm prejudiced, biased toward my daughter. But it kind of like what Calvin said, it indicated to me that I succeeded, at least in this one aspect of being a man. And I'm reminded of it every time I think of her, see her photo, many photos in my house.
Is she your only child?
Pardon me?
Is she the only child?
I'm sorry, I got to crank up a little bit.
Okay. Is she your only child?
Yes, she is.
Okay. I was about to say, if you're not talking about your other children.
That wouldn't be nice.
That's so true.
Pounding on my door, right?
So I think it's interesting that both of you pointed to this idea of being successful, being accomplished, being able to manage something. So what makes that so important for men, you think, or for you specifically as a man? Either of you.
Managing something, did you say?
Succeeding, yeah, to be successful or being able to manage whatever it is that you commit to.
Boy, that's a good question. I asked Calvin. I want to see what he says first.
I think we just had an example of how important it is to be successful.
Right.
Calvin, what would you say to that?
Yeah, one of the things that we pile on ourselves is keeping up with the world, or keeping up with other men or other examples of success. And so we put a lot of stress on ourselves to do that. And so any time that we can see in life that we won at something, is really something we hang on to, and we like to carry that as a symbol of strength, or something that helps us through other times or harder times. And it's just that important if to have an example in our mind and our heart about ways we've succeeded, because that helps us overcome the darker moments sometimes, well, most of the time, I would say.
What is it that makes that so important, though? I get that it's important to have it, but what is that? What impact does it have? Where does that come from?
Part of it is, in my opinion, if there are others depending on us, we have to be there for them, or we have to succeed, or we have to continue on for them as well. And if they can't count on us, then what else can they count on?
Well, Valerie, I thank you, Calvin, because you've got a whole bunch of thoughts going in my head. Men are very misunderstood, and I'm not saying that from a poor me perspective. And we are hard to understand. But when it comes to a success, my standards are fairly easy. I found out earlier in life that people sometimes find me funny. And if you can make somebody laugh or even smile or get their mind off of everything that is weighing them down or would like to weigh them down, that's a success. And I try to carry that with me everywhere I go, not to make light of anything. And sometimes I just can't help myself. But it has to be useful in some kind of way to get people to smile, forget about their troubles, just laugh at this dumb guy.
So a measure of success for you is to have people laugh and smile, because you do bring your humor out a lot.
Well, it's a gift. And it's not just that. I really love people, especially children. They are so much smarter than we are. And their troubles are not any lighter than ours. It's not easy being a kid. We all remember that. So I've worked with a lot of at-risk kids here in Dallas and in New Orleans and other places. And gosh, if you can help a kid make his or her life a little easier, I think that will stay with them.
Yeah. You know, just a question just popped in my head. I'm wondering, when did you first notice or realize that you were a man and it mattered to you? And I mean, I get that obviously upon being born, you were given a male name and perhaps, the accoutrement of manhood, toys and clothes and stuff like that. But at what point in time, if you could remember a moment where you were like, oh, this is what being a man means to me. Can you remember a moment that signified that for you, for either of you?
I can. It was when I got my first job. I started out as a radio DJ, and I found out that I was good at it and that I really loved it. And I felt right then and there that, okay, if you can like this work, if you look forward to going to work, your life is going to be a whole heck of a lot easier.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can't think of one moment, but I can think of, or I can see all of the times where, we were given the you're going to be a man, or you're a young man, or there's ways that you can provide for the world. And Skip, when you were talking about your gift of laughter, it made me wonder. So you recognize your gift of giving laughter or making people laugh. I mean, is that a way that you see that you can provide something great for the world? I mean, is that?
Yeah, I think so, Calvin. I mean, like I said a little earlier, if you can make somebody else's life a little bit easier, even if it's only for a few minutes,
right?
It's just a good thing to do. I never felt bad doing that. I was never embarrassed. I never felt like, oh, cut it out, guy. I mean, come on, get real. This is a tough life, and you need to be tough and strong. The typical thing that we were brainwashed with as young boys, right? I mean, I'm sure your upbringing was similar to mine in that, you got to be strong. You don't cry. You don't lose. If you get in a fight, you got to win it. And that's a lot to carry around, So I started making fun of it. And I realized, well, okay, if I get beat up in a fight, I get beat up in a fight. They're not big enough to kill me. And I'll do the opposite. I'll laugh at them and then make them hit me again. You think that was good? Watch this.
That's funny. Yeah, I remember early days in my roughish neighborhood growing up. I used my speed to get out of fights or whatever, in the sense of if you can beat me to this street light or street pole, you can hit me all you want. But most of the time they couldn't beat me. So that always, yeah. So
wait. So you would say, I'll let you hit me if you can catch me?
Right. Basically, that's what it boils down to.
I like it.
It's genius. And they actually honored that?
Yeah, they fell for it every time.
But little did they know that you were a track star, right?
Exactly. I mean, so it was, yeah.
That's what used to bother me about when I was in grade school. I think a lot of guys can identify with this. I've always been tall and skinny, right? So when they started choosing sides for the football team, I'm the last guy around. But what they didn't know is that I could run. And if they would throw the ball at me, I could make a touchdown. But
Exactly.
They never thought about, no, you need to be big, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Big time, mean ass guy.
I don't bleep anything in the show, so just let me know. You really say you love kids, Skip.
I did. Yeah, I didn't say anything else.
You said something earlier, Skip, that I think it'd be cool to think for the two of you to talk about. You said that these ideas that men are brainwashed with, or that you're brainwashed to think, or others are brainwashed to think about men and boys. I'm curious about what are some of the things that in your, Calvin and Skip, in your opinion, we've been brainwashed to think about manhood or about boys. Anybody, both men and women, or anyone, any whatever gender identification.
We were brainwashed about women. For one thing, that the girls are, I hate to use this term, but this is what was used on us in one way or another, the weaker sex, and that we have to protect them and all of this kind of stuff. And I think a lot of women these days resent that in their upbringing. But that they brainwash to be, don't cry. If you get in a fight, win, and don't come home if you didn't win. That kind of stuff. And then they gave us a fall, and it's not my parents, it's Western society, in my view. It sticks to this separation between the genders. That the man is strong, silent type, never cries, doesn't show his emotion, blah, blah, blah. And the women are supposed to, oh, that is so nice, like you're such a man. Well, it doesn't work that way. I don't know if it ever did.
Mm-hmm. I would say the biggest thing, I mean, some of the things that Skip said were there. I think the thing that had the most impact, though, was not really being able to express yourself. Because older men learned not to be expressive, younger men didn't have someone they can be expressive to other than the women in their life. I grew up with my grandmother. Basically, she raised me when my mom was out, when she probably had 2 or 3 jobs. I don't really remember a lot about her. She died when I was really young. My biological father wasn't there, but my grandmother and my aunt basically raised me. But I remember being able to lean on them or talk to them about things, and them sharing a lot about their life and their experiences, their marriages, things that they were disappointed in. And I think that's what I brought forward into the conversation of the man panel and other aspects of relationships into my life. But I think not having an adult male that you can express yourself to was something that I think is missing in this world.
It's funny.
I was raised by my parents, but we lived across the street from my grandparents, and my grandfather was just the biggest character. He was an Irish guy, and he was funny. He was kind of loud, but he loved kids, and I was raised with two male cousins. We're only a few months apart in age. So it was kind of like boys were having a good time when he was around. And I learned a lot from him. His personality was just out there, and he didn't care if you didn't like him. He was like 6'4" and he weighed like 220. And if you didn't like him, I just gave him an excuse to punch out, right? he taught me not, he gave me a lot of courage about being small, about being skinny and easily beat up. And I never did like this fighting stuff. I mean, even at 5 or 6 years old, I mean, I was like, what's the point? I mean, just drummed into our head. But the older folks, I have found, just in my own life, have a lot to say if you could get them talking.
That is very true. I have 3 brothers. I'm the only girl. And recently, what I've discovered, well, recently, I would say in the last 5 to 7 years or so, I've realized the power that I have to connect people. Like I do it here on the podcast, obviously, but in my own family, because I became, I think, like the dad whisperer. Because there's stuff that my dad would tell me that he never shared with my brothers. And I was like, how are you not talking to dad about this? You should hear what he has to say about X, Y, Z. And they're like, nope, he's never said anything. Really? What? And to this day, actually, my dad, he doesn't watch this podcast anyway, but I'll tell him. He was sharing how much he wants to connect with his grandchildren. But my dad has not been one to be very expressive anyway. I think Skip, you may have met my dad on a couple of occasions, but he's not very expressive. He likes to laugh. He's very gregarious.
Oh, he's a character. I love him.
He's gregarious, but he doesn't share his emotions or things that are important to him very easily. But he shared with me once, he goes, yeah, you're so lucky that you get a chance to be with I'm close to my nieces and nephews who live here in Dallas. So I get to spend some time with them, and I'm always taking pictures and videos of them and the things that we do. And he said, you're so lucky to be there. I wish I could really spend more time and, getting to know them and seeing them growing up. And I'm like, do you video call? Like, do you tell my brothers this? They're the keepers of the kids. They could make this work. And he hasn't. And I'm like, why is he holding that back of all things? He's in his 70s. And so I'm like, if nothing else, this is such crucial time for them to know their grandfather and for him to know their grandchildren. But so I'm curious about what you guys think, what is it that makes men, and maybe it's a generational thing to your point, but what is it that has men hold back something that they value so deeply, even inside a family?
Well, your dad was a military man, and so he got twice what the rest of it. Well, I was military also, but he was career. He got twice the brainwashing that we got.
Twice the brainwashing.
Well, I don't know what else to.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I get that.
I mean, it is an ugly word, but Western society, and I don't want to get off, into all of that. I mean, Western society has these strict personality traits that a woman has to have and that a man has to have, and never the twain shall meet. And it's unfortunate. What you say to that, Calvin?
It is a mystery. I think, being vulnerable is a difficult thing, because one of the things we don't want is people to use that against us, or to show a weakness in our, in who we are. And if someone can harm us in that way, we don't want to open that door. And as we know people, the ones that we are closest to, they can harm us the most. So that is even harder to be vulnerable to in the first place, in my opinion. Wow. That's kind of how I see it. But
I do weaponize the information I have.
Yeah.
No, not you, Valerie.
Unintentionally, my brothers have called me out at least twice. We have this thing, we get together on occasion on Zoom, and we just did that last night. The four of us, or whoever can join, we'll join and we'll just talk. And we'll talk about when we were kids, we'll talk about things with our parents, all sorts of things. And I talk to each of my brothers individually. So these are the few times that we all get together. And it so happened on a couple of occasions when something's been shared with me that I said, hey, did you tell him about that thing? And he's like, no. I've been called out twice. He's like, why do you do that? Why do you? If we told you, it's because we told you about it, not for you to bring it out in the, man. So I'm working on it. But for me, I think the reason I do it, and it's not, at least from my perception, is not anything that would damage the reputation or anything shameful, but is what I think would really connect. And that is like, man, if you guys could just share this piece of yourselves with each other, man, that would like, and somehow it, I put my foot in it. It's really just like,
it's okay, because there are things that men are more, we do more instinctually than women. There's things that women do that are more instinctual to them. And women are, in my opinion, the connectors of the world. It shows up in so many different ways in community. So that's, women, they bring bond, they bring likeness, they bring connectivity to the community. It's the greatness of women. That's one of the things that I love about women. And guys, we're, if we go back to the caveman days, and it's instinctual to be a little bit more protective. We have our own little realms that we guard all the time. So it goes way deeper in our roots than just a conscious thing. It's very unconscious, a lot of decisions that we make.
And it makes communication between men and women, whether they just barely know each other, but more likely in a relationship, it makes it difficult for them to communicate about these things. And the more we can throw off these old, thousands of year olds impressions that were taught to us as children, the more we can get rid of that and talk to each other. And I'm talking about men and women to each other, not guys to each other, because for us that's easy. But if we can talk about something that we're embarrassed to talk about, or something that makes us vulnerable, we should. And I understand, Calvin, about what you said about being vulnerable. It does expose you. It does make it easy for somebody to come in and smack you emotionally if they know stuff about you. But in a romantic relationship, or even just a friendly relationship, like my friendship with Lydia, who we talk about anything basically that can be spoken of. I don't know if I'm getting my point across here.
No, I think I understand what you're trying to say. I mean, yeah, definitely it takes some learning from a man and a woman to understand who can I be vulnerable with, and who should I not be vulnerable with. So, one of the things, the more we experience another person and experience their value system, or just kind of how they operate in life, we understand, okay, yeah, I can be more open with this person. I think that's how some male and female relationships, even as friendships, they can become tighter, because they've learned I can trust this other person. They're not going to use XYZ against me, or they're not going to, bring any harm about from what I said. So yeah, I mean, but it does take a while for most guys that I know to warm up to being vulnerable to in relationships.
It's not easy.
No.
Because everything we've been taught up to that point is against that. But it's healthy. I read a lot of female writers. on a couple of different websites who are writing about communication or lack thereof. And there's a bunch of women out there that really don't like men, period. It has become, our bad behavior has become stereotypical.
Right.
And it was really a surprise to me, as long as I've been around, to learn that there are women who just don't care for us because they have stereotyped us. And we've been brought up to be alike in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
Men. And I can see why women don't like a lot of that, but we can, I think we can. I know many men who have and who will throw that stuff off and be vulnerable to somebody who's important to you.
You know, it's interesting that you say this, because I, growing up with three brothers, and my dad is in the military, a strong mother figure as well. I didn't think less of men, but I thought I had to be as strong as men. Because I had to be as strong as the men in my life. That was how I was conditioned. My brothers, and probably I brought it upon myself, because I was like, I can do that too. I don't want to have to do the dishes. I can go mow the lawn. I was that girl growing up. And I had a lot of boys in my life constantly. My brothers would always bring friends. And so if I wanted to be included, I had to be one of the boys, essentially.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because of anything they did or said, but I just felt that was my way to show how much I was valued and how much I could bring to the conversation. Little did I realize in my 30s that it would work against my romantic relationship.
Exactly.
Like, oh,
Exactly.
you mean my husband didn't appreciate me like I can do just as good as you can moments? It was horrible. It was terrible.
It's true, you can.
Yes, and I didn't have to.
That's right.
But I felt I had to. And I didn't know at the time. And that's one of the things I learned so much, and I value so much about the courses that I took with the Understanding Men courses, because I remember the very first time I really just got that I didn't have to do the things that I had been conditioned to do. And that in my marriage, I was married for 3 years, and my ex, he's a good person, really beautiful soul, emotionally connected. There were all the things that I really appreciated about him. And I remember times when I was just like, oh my gosh, like, do you have to be so emotional about everything? So sentimental. And I'm like, I'll do it. Let me do this. I'll take care of that. And I was always like, I don't know if it was like a one-upmanship as much as, I don't think you can handle it as well as I can. Let me show you how. And that all of those moments were like cutting away at the root of our relationship. And I would do it sometimes in front of other people, because I didn't know any better. I literally didn't know. And so, it's been 16 or so years since we were married and divorced. Actually, we were divorced in 2006 or something. And I remember, after the courses I took a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, I called him, because we now are friends. We've developed a really wonderful friendship. And I called him up and I was like, Ivan, guess what? I learned. And I said, remember all those times that I said I would do this and you couldn't do that? And maybe in front of other people, there were these, some shades, some digs. And I didn't realize I was completely emasculating you in front of other people, or even in my own eyes. And I'm so sorry. And he's like, why are you saying sorry? It's been years, water under the bridge. And I'm like, no, I get it. But I want to take responsibility. That was never my intent. And I see the impact that it had on our relationship. It just continued to wear that down. And he was quiet for a moment. He was like,
that's how you were raised. I mean, you were raised with a bunch of guys who had a bunch of guy friends. And I think something like that is almost inevitable. I have a sister. I have a brother and a sister. And the sister is the middle, and I'm the oldest. My brother's the youngest. And we've had discussions about that kind of thing, where my sister would say, well, this is what our father said about you to me. Well, why didn't he tell me?
There you go. That's what we talked about.
We're going in a complete circle here, but
Crazy.
because he was from that other generation who was even more manly, raised to be more manly than even I was. And I'm, in those years, 70s, and he, with him, it was even worse. But I guess we all have these things that happen to us in our families that have shaped us in our relationships with other people, whether for better or worse. It's there. And, Valerie, I don't think you should be, feeling bad about yourself about that. It's just how you were raised.
Yeah.
And, we can all learn to change, and we can all learn to modify, and we can all learn each other by asking questions and really listening to the answers and analyzing those answers against what we know about life. It can really improve the communication.
Absolutely.
But I have to say, Valerie, I'm really proud of what you did when you called him up and you expressed, your realization of all of the things that were said or done. I mean, that takes a lot. And
yes, it does.
I mean, to me, that's really powerful that you took the time to do that and acknowledge that. And I think that's one of the things that we don't do enough of today is to go back and acknowledge, okay, something happened in the past. I've learned something now. And now I see the difference of how this could have made a difference back then. And I think that's really powerful because then it allows you to move forward with so much more strength and so much more to give in a relationship. And again, I'm really proud of what you did in that regard. And so, yeah, I mean, that's awesome.
I've never heard of a woman doing that, and I'm divorced also. And I cannot, for the life of me, even picture, and I'm not running my ex down, but she had the personality that wouldn't give. And I just can't see, I don't think I have ever heard of anybody else doing that, of another woman calling, or even another man calling up and say, no, I was wrong.
Yeah.
I did it.
Right.
Well, I thank you, first of all. And I know that I'm not unique in having done that, but I think it required me to do some inner work first, right? It wasn't enough just to know, oh, this didn't work out and I have to now say sorry about it. It was really the realization that that's not what I want for my relationships. And even for myself, I really knew that I wanted to balance out, this masculine energy that I'd grown up around that became such a part of my identity and personality that I needed to balance it out because it's exhausting. It was exhausting to have to feel like I had to, and that I could, and that I needed to. And it's just and in my last relationship, I remember my ex-boyfriend, he was very, also very caring, but also much more, I think he Egyptian. So his background has also, there were certain things that men did and women did. It was much more clear cut for him. And although he was very open, it was funny how he was exactly the right person for me to have in my life, because I needed to amp up a part of me that required to support and to ask for help and to be more receptive rather than to be the person to initiate. Right. And it was frustrating. It was hard. And I was just like, oh, I wish I could just, but no, I'm going to be in receiving mode. I'm a queen now.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it was hard.
So you reminded me of my wife. So, she raised 2 kids of her own for 20 something years, and, doing all of the chores around the house, even those outside. When we got married and I started to take over those things or do those things, she admitted how hard it was for her to give those up. And but she really appreciated that I could now do that for her. And it was my gift to her, using my muscles and my body as I can as a man as a tool to get things done, certain things done. That's what I offer to do for her, even to today. So, but yeah.
We should all do that. All of us.
Yeah, but yeah. So it was, I definitely acknowledge it. Yeah, she can do it. She's done it for all these years, but hey, I'm here now. let
Right.
me use what God gave me and help and do it. So yeah.
That's so cool. I got to give props to my brothers, because I think it also impacted how I leveraged their relationship with me. Whereas before it was always through conversation. I mean, now I'm much more apt to say, hey, can you do this for me? Can I get your help with that? Can I? Whereas before it was more of a mark of pride to say, hey, guess what I did? Look what I did on my own. I can do this too. Now it's like, hey, guess Ricky helped me with this, or, Eduardo changed my tire for me, or Rolando did XYZ. And but I didn't realize that was the flip that would bring balance.
Right, exactly.
And you, like, I think women, like you said, Skip, women, we've also had some brainwashing, right? And especially I'm Generation X, and you can do anything, you be anything, and hey, yes, we can, and we don't have to exhaust ourselves to prove anything. And I think that's the small thing that we missed. And so I'm curious, from the two of you, what, both of you have women in your life that you love and care about and deal with on a regular basis. What do you wish women knew about you, specifically you? Because I imagine, other men will have their version of this, but what specifically do you wish more women knew about you that we don't know or don't ask?
Well, I'm very emotional, and I'm very patient. I don't ever get impatient with people I love, but I'm also very perceptive, and I can understand things without someone having to explain it to me. Of course, the verbal explanation always helps, but I mean, I can be as much of the quintessential man as is needed, like Calvin. I mean, he recognized, to his credit, that he could help her. I lost my train of thought.
But you're understanding that perception.
That beyond all this idiocy that I have for fun, that there is a real live human being underneath the fun and all of that, who is probably smarter than most people think. And yeah, I kind of wish women knew that. Not that I'm in the market, as it were. I'm definitely not. I had a plan of that.
Whoa, wait, Skip. What had you throw that in? What should we know that you're not saying?
That I'm not really looking for a relationship.
Okay.
Most guys are, and I have, but I'm kind of getting to a point where I can finally do a lot of the things that I have put off, put away, couldn't afford, couldn't find someone to help me with. And I'm at that point now where there's a whole bunch of stuff I want to do. I'm a pilot. I want to fly more. That is the greatest. That is almost therapeutic for me, to get a hold of an airplane with my fingers and make it go with, like this big metal. But there's nothing like that. And I used to get some grief when I was married about spending time doing that. So I sold the airplane and I gave it up. And I have missed it ever since. Languages. Valerie knows this, and Eduardo knows. I want to learn and use these languages, because in Dallas, this is a very diverse community in this city, and obviously Spanish, you can use that every day. I speak French, and I can't use that every day, but I know where people are, or where they hang out, or how I can get in touch with them who speak the language or who are French. And I have kind of like want to take care of myself a little bit better.
Got it. Okay, so you're not in the market. So ladies, stand down.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, the second year.
Noted, Skip. Calvin, what about you? What would you like for the women in your life, or the women that you know, to know about you that we haven't asked or that we don't notice?
Well, Wow.
See, that's
So,
hard for us to say.
yeah, it
Right?
is.
Am I right, Calvin?
Exactly.
Is
So,
a test.
yeah. Well, I am happily married. I have the most amazing queen in my life. So she is amazing. As a matter of fact, as Valerie mentioned, we met in a workshop. I attended a workshop understanding women because I was trying to wonder in past relationships, is it me or is it what's going on what's going on here? Is it me or is it the women that I'm dating or whatever? And so I went to Understanding Women workshop, and her group that does it in Dallas, they were putting or facilitating that workshop. So that's where I met her for the first time. And so the material was so amazing to me that I started, I learned the information and I started teaching locally. One of the things I do is a men's only workshop as well. But I would say in general, I think it's important for women to know that there are some three primary instincts that drive men on a daily basis. I mean, almost in everything we do. And so it'd be important to kind of look for how those show up in the men in your life. So the first one is procreate. And procreate, has everything to do with sex. It's a big driver of men. But procreate also pertains to creativity. I mean, sounds like Skip does some writing. That's a part of his life. That's a part of procreating for him, his mind creating something new. Also protect, that's a big one for us. We look for ways to protect those in our life at every moment in time, even if it's saving them for like mowing the yard so my wife wouldn't have to, protecting her energy, protecting, it can show up in those kind of ways. And the other thing is providing. So procreate, protect, and provide. Those are three big instincts that drive us every day in our life. And it shows up in a lot of different ways. So anytime those are called into question or emasculated, that's a big deal for us. So yeah.
I think I would, my protecting one or the providing one was the one I think I emasculated most with my ex. It would be like, I can do this, don't worry about it. Or,
Right.
whenever he offered to assist or he'd ask, questions, like one too many questions for me to feel comfortable that he could do it like that. So that was the one I didn't realize all the time. And protect, it's funny because I see my brothers now, and especially with their kids. My youngest brother, well, the two younger ones are twins. And so one of the twins, he has two 3-year-olds. He has twin 3-year-olds. And he mentioned how he, wants to take them to different places and wants to do different things. But in light of the pandemic, he's like, I don't want them to be around certain places, certain people, doing certain activities and public playgrounds, and I have to be careful. And like how much of that runs how he manages his, his time with his children. It was really fascinating to watch. And then his twin talked about how he wants to help his oldest daughter, his 15-year-old daughter, on certain projects. And she's been resisting. She reminds me a lot of me at that age, where I was just like, I can do my own stuff and I don't need your help. And when I hear her say stuff, I'm like, well, you'll get therapy, you'll have a divorce or two. I don't know.
Exactly.
No, I don't hope that for her, but it was so funny to see how much he feels compelled to help her, make life easy for her, to help her do stuff.
Good man.
Right. I want to say one thing. So you reminded me of something, Valerie. I wonder if women think that because we can do something for them, it doesn't mean that we think they can't. It's that we want to provide that for you. It's not about that you can't do it. As Skip said, we're in a world of, women can do it, men can do it. We know that you can, but we want to do it for you.
Yeah.
We want to provide that for you. And we won't look less upon the women the women in our life because we're doing it for them. That's not our go-to thought. That it's that I want to provide this for you. So please let me provide this for you because of how much I value and or treasure you. That's really all it's about.
Well, you can articulate that, Calvin, I think in a way that maybe women could hear better. But when you talk about it being an instinct, I mean, how many people, and from anywhere could really articulate why there's such a drive and why we're so compelled. And I think that's the piece that might be missing. That we have an instinct that that has us act and behave in certain ways, but we can always explain to the person why and where that's coming from, which makes people also instinctually want to, okay, wait, let me push back. I think you're encroaching upon something that's important to me, but we don't always have the language. So I'm curious with the two of you, and this might sound like a little bit of a left turn, but I don't know if it was Calvin or Skip, you talked about this in relation to the stereotype of men now, right? When you think about some of the behaviors that have been called out, and public figures have been called out for certain behaviors. And then a lot of those behaviors, I would imagine, driven by instinct.
Exactly.
But also can be a bit destructive. So I'm curious about your take on some of how instinct drives people to behave in ways that are really damaging to not only their reputations, but perhaps the relationships and the impact that they have on other people. And I'm talking about things like the Me Too movement. I'm talking about things like, misogyny. I'm talking about all the ways in which, people have been misbehaving, if you will.
Right.
You have to stay in touch with what is happening in your country, in your city. You have to be really alert as to what societal changes are taking place and what you are expected to do, not necessarily what you grew up to think you had to do, but what you can do. I hope that makes sense.
Give us an example, Skip.
Well, I cannot work on cars. I know them really well, and I know what to tell the mechanic when I put it in the shop. I know what's wrong, but I can't fix it myself. And I was really beaten up by my ex for not being able to do that. The deal was, well, you're a man. You don't tell me you can't work on cars. Well, I am a man and I can't work on cars. And she kind of went to pieces on that. So I think what I'm getting at is that we have unrealistic expectations for each other. And most of this was honed and shaped and formed in our background from our youth, from our childhood, from our family experiences. And those things are hard to change. But you have to stay alert and realize that, this thought or this opinion that I've had for a long time is no longer beneficial to anyone. So you just have to be able to change, to make the effort to stay alert, to find out where you're wrong and where you're right. And once you know that, you can get along with just about anybody.
Interesting. I think, but one of the things I think society is poor at, one of the things, and I talk about this at work, is critical thinking. We don't think about things deep enough to really understand what it is we're asking. So society has expectations, but we don't have a deeper understanding of why something is or how something is.
And we're resistant. Not us, you and me, Calvin, but I think people in general are resistant to change. My theory, I have lived and traveled to a lot of places on this planet, and I've come to the conclusion that a third of us are jerks. 1/3 of any population, city, state, country, continent, whatever, they just aren't there. And you want to figure out why. Well, it's everybody blames bad parenting, and bad parenting is a big part of it. But we're very, very imperfect unless we know what we're doing wrong and are willing to admit that it's wrong and fix it. And for some people, easily a third, in my opinion, that's almost impossible.
I think the challenge is, and my mom and I had a conversation about this last night, specifically around the Governor Cuomo. Actually, you saw
Oh,
stepping down, and
Right.
and what was so interesting is, she and I are from two different generations, and her point of view is just like, he's done a good job. What's the big deal? These women when and I want to be cautious because my mother is as progressive as there can be a woman, right? So
yes, she is.
yes, she is no
Love
shrinking
that lady.
violet. But it
Oh,
was so interesting to hear her perspective around what the women should and shouldn't do, and what is fair to expect or not expect of a man, especially a man in this position. And I was just like, Mom, what
Wow.
are you talking about? No, you got to be responsible. And I've had some of this education, so I understand, I think, the idea of instinct being a driver, but I also understand that this stuff doesn't work. It doesn't work to weaponize instinct, no matter what culture you're from, no matter how your upbringing, and we are much more, affectionate in these cultures or whatever. I'm like, no, that's not how we have these conversations. Now, I do agree that there's a responsibility for both men and women. And I'll give you a small example. When I was in college, I remember my freshman year in college, the dorm where I stayed was all women, but across the street was the men's dorm, and it was the largest one on campus, and they had the cafeteria was in the men's dorm. And so that's where I would go for my breakfast, lunch, and sometimes dinner. But I went for breakfast at least every single day. And behind the line, there was a gentleman who, the more often I went, the more familiar he became with me. Where, first was just good morning, how are you, how's it going, which was fine. And I was being polite. And as I would go through the line, get my stuff, and then I go eat. Well, eventually started getting into, baby, what's up, good to see you again, and more flirtatious. And it made me so uncomfortable. It was an older gentleman, and I was 19 or something like that. And I didn't know how to respond without it being rude. I
hate that about men.
I stopped going to breakfast.
I don't blame you.
I just didn't know what to do. And I was so like, I don't want to deal with it. I don't know what to say in a way that would be empowering to me or him. And I'm just not the kind of girl that would just be tell off somebody. So I just stopped going to eat.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, you bring up one of the points that I think, honestly, I mean, I think it is a failure of society to really understand instinct. But one major one that we tackle in our workshops is the instinct of procreate. How much of a driver that is in our instinct as a species to procreate and continue the species. I mean, we're animals. That's part of who we are. The amygdala and the hippocampus, all those things have us act in the same way it would for animals out in the world. So if we start with that basic understanding, we can at least try to address some things realistically. I think as a society, we look past that. We're so much so sophisticated. We should be past this now. But until we really understand the basics of who we are, then that's where we can really start to tackle some issues and really address, why is it that this man is acting this way, or whomever is acting this way, or even, female teachers or with young, with students or whatever. Those have been in the headlines in the past. But, it is one of those things that we just do not pay enough attention to. We look past it. And I think that's one of our faults as a society.
That's what I was alluding to a while ago when I was suggesting that we need to stay alert for stuff like this. Now, this was an older guy, and it was okay for him to do that when he was young, but he didn't keep up with society. He didn't realize that you just don't do that. You just don't do that. And I noticed that a lot of misbehavior does come from older men. And I could talk about that for an hour, but I'm not, this isn't the time or place. But they're not keeping up with it. Cuomo, he didn't think it was bad. Oh, come on, how stupid can you be? The governor of a state, I'm sure I'm making a lot of people angry right now, but he's the current example. And Bill Clinton was another example. You just don't do that. Maybe when you were a kid, maybe when you were a teenager, you could get away with it, but you don't do it anymore, do
I don't
you?
think teens get away with it anymore either. I mean, this is, as
Well,
far as society goes, is not acceptable. And I think that the difference now is, how do we empower both men and women to call out bad behavior in a way that leaves both empowered? So I think what's happened is there's so much shame involved, either shame for having been the subject, shame for speaking out about it, shame. There's so much shaming that either, I wish I would have been able to smoothly and suavely been able to say something just to let this guy know, hey, you know what, that's not appropriate, but not in a way that would be shameful to him or me or embarrass him in front of other people. Not because I want to protect him, because I knew my character, but the way that I chose to deal with it was just avoiding it altogether. And that didn't feel good either. Like,
no.
Breakfast was good. It's good to start the day with some
Right.
breakfast.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what advice would you give women or men who have been put in situations where this instinct has, been, they had to confront someone's instinct in an inappropriate way?
I don't know if that's instinct. I think that is just not being aware. I don't think there's any instinct involved. I mean, sure, instinctually, men like sex. But there's a lot of societal norms and societal preventive things that keep you from giving into that. And you're being way more generous than I would be, Valerie, with that. I would have.
It's only because it's my show and I don't want this to follow. Like, if I ever run for office, I don't want to be an episode.
No. But if I see that happening, I will say something to the man. I will say something, and it's gotten me, kind of in a little, not really in trouble. Nobody wanted to punch.
You would say that to someone that you saw behaving badly, or what? What do you mean?
I heard it. I was uptown. I take myself out to dinner, and there's a really, there's all kind of nice places to go. And I was walking out, and there was a guy. The woman had walked out in front of me, like maybe, 10, 15 feet. But as soon as she walked out, I was right behind her, and there was a guy right there started hitting on her. And it wasn't nice. It wasn't like he was trying to introduce himself or however, these smooth talkers do it. He was all over her. And I said, whoa, stop. And he looked at me like, what? I said, you're being rude. And she's not going to be any interested in you. And if you were to wake up and realize that you're being rude, crude, and indecent, you'll probably never have another date in your life. And he didn't like that at all. But I guess it's because I'm a parent of a daughter that I'm well, you mentioned it, Calvin, protective. And a lot of women don't like that about men. But in this case, it was a younger woman, and I'm a father of a younger woman, and this guy was trampling all over her. And I had to say something about it. It wasn't very smart of me. Well, Valerie, it was instinctual. That was instinctual from my perspective as a father.
Two things I think are really interesting. One is, did you have him try to beat you to the phone pole or something? Like, outrun him. That's the first thing that came to mind. But the second thing is, it's funny because if this guy's instinct was the procreation instinct was driving, Skip, your instinct was the protective instinct. Like, so at any given point, the different instincts could be clashing with each other and in different times for different people.
That's a good observation.
I think it's fascinating.
Right.
And I think the three that you had mentioned earlier, Calvin, they can come out all three at once. There are situations and, certain circumstances and vibes and all that kind of stuff going around where it was instinctual for me to interrupt that. And it was also, I'm losing my trend of thought, but it was also societal because I am a father and I do feel like I have responsibilities to women, and I know a lot of women aren't going to like that, but I can't help it. If I see that again, I'll still, go in there and say, don't do that. Because I've got my own daughter. Well, it did happen to her once where a guy was not very nice to her, and she had to hold me down. I was going to go to his dorm room and, clock him down, but that's not good either. As men, if we're going to be protective, we have to kind of put a little bit of a rope on our protective instinct, because instinctually we can maybe cross a line, and I've come very close to doing that, but I can't help it.
Right. Yeah. Not being able to help it. That's true. And so that's one of those things where our protective instinct as a young boy is supported. That is supported in so many ways, and there's a lot to say about that. But so if it's natural for us and that instinct is supported and to protect things, then we're gonna build upon that as we get older. But going back to the situation that you saw, Skip. So I think one of the things that happened in that scenario is that guy probably has whatever language or whatever body language and whatever he was using to pick up that girl, he's probably had success at it. For one, for him to continue in that way, to say, because he's looking, one of the things that he's learned is that I can win at getting a girl by being this way. If that was to get shut down, he would say, oh, this doesn't work. So then I need to change that behavior. But for some reason, that's worked for him in the past. And it has worked on particular women. And so it's a numbers game, right? I mean, picking up women is a numbers game. As a guy, you learn these lines or whatever, you go out and you use them, and they'll work on someone. But that's one of those things where in that scenario, it probably is just, oh, this has worked before, I'm gonna use it, but it didn't work that time because there was a protector there. He didn't know there was a sheepdog around to protect the girl from the wolf.
I had a male buddy like that, Calvin. I had a male friend like that. We would go into a bar after work, and we'd have a couple. This is in New Orleans, and everybody, it's a very social atmosphere there. So this guy would go to every woman who didn't have a date in the bar and say something ugly, but he'd eventually walk out with someone. And he nailed, he kept picking on me. He goes, you keep telling me not to do this. Well, look, it just worked. Well, it took you a week and a half of, every night, and you must know the odds against that are humongous.
Yes.
But as you said, it's a numbers game. But I don't want to play that. I don't like that.
I think is coming full circle to the beginning of this conversation about doing what it takes to succeed, and for as long as it takes.
Well, that has its place. But that isn't it.
Look, gentlemen, I have so enjoyed this conversation. And I think there might be a part 2 in there somewhere. But I want to start to close this up a little bit. And first of all,
we're hits, man. We're hits. We did good.
Yes.
Success. But I do want to ask, I want to zoom out a bit from the conversation we've had, just to reflect on what are the two of you taking away from this conversation, from this experience being on a podcast with a stranger, talking about some of the most, some personal things. What are you each taking away from this experience?
Well, I've taken away what Calvin said about the 3 Ps and how that plays into all of our relationships and all of our personalities. And I've also taken, Calvin, you're a good man, and it's a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah.
You have no idea how badly we are stereotyped by a lot of women, and it's just encouraging for me to meet another good man. So that's my
Likewise, definitely. Yeah, so I'm taking away. I mean, this is a powerful conversation. And I think one of the things that it brings to light is just, how important it is that society as a whole just starts to embrace more of who we are in our completeness as human beings, both men and women. And, there, like the podcast says, there are more things that we have in common than that makes us different.
Amen.
So that's really powerful.
Embrace our completeness. I love that.
Mhm.
And about the experience of meeting the two of you, I'm curious. I always like to ask my guests what was surprising to you, or what was pleasing to you, and out of meeting a stranger and having this type of conversation.
Calvin, go ahead.
Let's see, what was surprising? I don't know. I would say just me not taking any preconceived ideas of how the conversation would go, but what was surprising is how great the conversation was, and the topics and what we had to share. I mean, that was the most powerful thing.
Well, being a communications person, I think the three of us did a good job in that order. I mean, we knew pretty much what had to happen here and what didn't have to, and that kind of thing. And we made it happen. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I mean, the three of us, we've covered some ground, and it's a good thing, and it's healthy, and it builds you up to be able to communicate on a level that the three of us hit on here. It's just a good thing. I can't be really specific about it. It just felt really good.
Well, it felt good to me too. I am so happy to have had the two people who I knew could bring not only humor, but also care, respect, interest into this level of conversation. It's something that I think is missing. To your point, we hear so often, so frequently through the media, whether it's social media, whether it's mass media, just the messages that are really continuing to reinforce the stereotypes in many cases, right? There's a few times here and there that there are voices that are kind of breaking us out of it, or at least a conversation that will help people question, right? Which is why I thought this really could challenge status quo and disrupt some of it. And so I so appreciate the two of you for being so upfront, so honest, so vulnerable, so generous with your examples, your sharing. I noted the instinct for procreation, for bringing something into the world, a new idea or a new process. So I appreciate that. Your instinct to protect, right, by making sure that each of us felt honored and respected, and appreciating what was said from each of us. And then this idea of providing, giving your ideas, your insights, your wisdom to me and to anyone that might be listening. So thank you all for this. It's so cool. And I wasn't kidding. There might be a part 2 involved. So clear your calendars, gentlemen.
Well, you're welcome. It was a pleasure being here.
And yes, Valerie, you are more than welcome.
I'm so glad. Any final words before we close it out?
No, thank you for the invite, and I really appreciate it. Nice to meet you, Skip. Thank you so much for sharing all that you did and your insight. I really appreciate it.
No, I same here, Calvin. I couldn't have said it any better. Thank the two of you for getting along with me.
I want to hear more about the flying too. I like to drive race cars, so I want to hear about the flying part.
Put a lot of time aside.
Well, it sounds like there's more conversation to come. So thank you, two of you, and anyone who's tuned into this episode of Not Quite Strangers. If you want to have this episode and many more directly in your inbox, please make sure you subscribe to www.notquitestrangers.com so that you get notified anytime we have a new episode. Thank you all so much again for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the podcast Not Quite Strangers. Be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite video or podcast platform. And for more information and content, go to notquitestrangers.com. See you next time.